Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024. I cannot think of a better individual to have with us for an in-depth geopolitical analysis than my next guest and our good friend and member of our Freedom family, Major General Paul Vallely. General Vallely retired from the United States Army as Deputy Commanding General of the United States Army in the Pacific. He graduated from the Great United States Military Academy at West Point and was commissioned in the Army, serving a distinguished career of 32 years. Paul is a graduate of the Infantry School, Ranger and Airborne Schools, Jumpmaster School, and Command and General Staff School, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, and the Army War College. Paul has over 15 years' experience in special operations, psychological, and civil military operations. He served in many overseas theaters to include Europe and the Pacific Rim countries, as well as 2 combat tours in Vietnam. He has served as a consultant to the Commanding General of the Special Operations Command. Paul has been a military analyst. You've seen him on TV and radio for close to 20 years now. He is also a guest lecturer on national security and international and political and economic issues, strategic planning matters, and the global war on terror. He also founded, in addition to all of that, he founded is the incredible organization Stand Up America US. So website, Stand Up America US. You got to put the US in there. StandUpAmericaUS.org. It is my honor to welcome back our friend, General Paul Vallely. Paul, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform and DaveJanda.com.
Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure to be on your show and try to reflect what's going on in this crazy world of ours.
So, Paul, let's talk about something here. You know, many months before the election in November 2020, you and myself and a number of other individuals brought forward the information and the significance of Hunter Biden's laptop. We were all called conspiracy theorists, that it really was a Russian disinformation plot and that it was not legitimate. Well, as you know, Paul, and our listeners are probably aware, the New York Times, who was one of the entities pointing their pointy little fingers at all of us as being conspiracy theorists and wrong about that laptop, headline from Glenn Greenwald, quote, "The New York Times now admits the Hunter Biden laptop," well, they falsely called it Russian disinformation, and it is in fact authentic. Paul, your take.
Well, the release last week, the facts that it is authentic, has no Russian connection whatsoever, but we know at least 12 members of the intelligence community have covered up the contents of that computer, and we're going to find further when information comes out of the ties to Ukraine and probably China as well, where the Biden crime family has just made millions and millions of dollars. And that just reflects how crooked the family is, just about as crooked or maybe more crooked than the Clintons.
In fact, Paul, before the election, 50 former Intel officials signed a document that Hunter Biden's laptop was in fact, and the revelation were fake. And those included Clapper, Brennan, Morell, and Panetta, just to name a few of the 50. Paul, I've been on record to say that all of the individuals that signed that letter, one, should be stripped of any benefits they currently are receiving from the federal government, and two, should be brought up on charges because their letter had a significant impact on the election and on the public, and in fact, these individuals could well be charged for treason. Paul, am I off on that?
No, I mean, these evil, deceitful people that we've had in the deep state continue to lie, continue to cover up, but yet we don't have a system of justice that's going to do anything to them, probably. They cover each other up continually. Clapper and these guys, I mean, they're a bunch of clowns and have been for a long time. But what's going to happen to them? Congress has hearings, but nothing ever happens to anybody.
Nope.
We have Durham still out with all the information that he's gathered, but he's only come forth recently just with one individual.
In fact, that Hunter Biden laptop, Paul, ties in with what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war today. In fact, the Hunter Biden laptop, as you mentioned, shows a money laundering operation of which the Biden family and the big guy, as mentioned in the laptop, the big guy being Joe Biden, got 10% of the cut of money laundering that occurred not just from China to the tens of millions of dollars, but also in Ukraine. And Ukraine, Paul, has been seen as a money laundering cesspool, a human trafficking cesspool, a drug trafficking cesspool, just to name a few. Am I off?
No, it has been for years one of the most corrupt nations in the world and in Europe. The money that's been laundered through there has just been incredible. Of course, Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family has taken advantage of that. Putin has known that for a long time, just like the Nazi, the Azovs that are stringed back to the Waffen-SS, the Wehrmacht, absolutely display the Nazi flag. I mean, there's more behind the scenes that America doesn't know about Ukraine.
Paul, before I get into your assessment about Ukraine, I want to provide to you and our listeners the assessment from the geopolitical expert herself, Kamala Harris. Derek, hit that brief clip.
If you're watching any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
There you go, Paul.
You can't change stupid, Dave. You just can't change stupid. I mean, what does she have between her ears?
Nothing.
I mean, a fifth grader would have more geopolitical sense or geography sense than she does. She's a total embarrassment, as our president is. And the likes of Putin and Xi in China, they understand it. They know it. The mullahs in Tehran. Everybody's laughing at us now in the United States to show how inept we are and how ineffective we are in geopolitical affairs.
So, Paul, educate our listeners on your assessment of the Russia-Ukraine war and as well as Ukraine itself, because when you mentioned the Azov battalion of being neo-Nazis that were supported by the Ukrainian government, many people are like, no, that's conspiracy theory. No, because we have people out there saying that the Zelensky guy, who's this former comedian and former actor and reportedly has a pretty big hacienda down in Florida, like to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That, and was for years overseeing the, money laundering operation in Ukraine and human trafficking and drug trafficking and the like. He's the next Churchill. Paul, educate our listeners on the truth.
Well, he's a puppet. He's a puppet of the Azovs, the ruling Ukrainian gangsters. My source in Ukraine comes from a very knowledgeable individual, intel operative I've worked with for the last 5 years. And he's been in Ukraine. He's lived there. He still has his contacts there daily, and he briefs me about every other day. But Zelensky's a puppet. He's not a democratically elected president. He was put in there. Certainly, more deaths have been caused in eastern Ukraine by the Azovs killing any pro-Russian Ukrainian they could find. And vast majority, at least 60% plus of the Ukrainians living in Donbass and that eastern part of Ukraine have been very pro-Russian. And many of them have escaped to Russia now, seeing what's going on. But Putin does not need to be bombing these cities. If his generals were smart, he would be bypassing all of the urban areas and not bombing innocent civilian locations. I think Putin is not served well by his generals. They're not experts in land warfare for sure. With the stall that we've seen now for the last 2 or 3 weeks all around the country, though there is movement going from east to west, the maintenance, the logistical supply lines. A good army does not overreach its supply lines logistically. That's, if you remember Operation Barbarossa, World War II, when Hitler overextended his supply lines headed to Russia. And basically then you had to defeat in Leningrad. But these generals don't seem to be very inept. I understand he's relieved some of them. I heard 5 generals were killed. Don't know that for sure. But certainly this isn't an army that's well-suited to land warfare as we've been trained, and I was trained at the academy, at the Army War College, and in combat. So not as all right on the Putin side there. But Putin had his reasons for going in, and we could have forestalled or prevented this if Trump was president, because he would have met with Putin and he would have declared that Ukraine will remain neutral. It will not be a NATO nation. It's been pushed by NATO for years as they've gobbled up many nations in Eastern Europe and placed them in NATO. So there you go.
So, Paul, in your introduction, I mentioned that you attended the Army War College and the like, and you obviously have served in combat. So you would think if there's anybody who said, let's have a war, it would be somebody like you. But in fact, Paul, if we just go back in time a few short years, many people don't know this, but we've actually discussed it a couple times on this platform. When Obama seemed to be pushing for a war in Syria, General Paul Vallely ended up going there, ended up meeting with some Russians, and ended up, through negotiations, preventing a war. And you're very modest about that, but that's the truth. Well, Paul...
you can see on YouTube, I went in with 400 men of the Free Syrian Army at the behest of 12 generals, Syrian generals, who had defected from Assad and wanted to get the country turned over to a democratic society. And I attempted by all means to help the Syrians and the Free Syrians, but Obama would not provide any kind of air support or any kind of supplies that they needed. And of course, we see at this time, Assad is still in power, still working with the Russians, of course. The Russians have a deep sea port at Tartus in the Indian Ocean, which leads then up to through the Bosporus up into the Black Sea. So a lot of things could have prevented if we had individuals that understood that area. I mean, I don't even have trust in our 4-star generals and admirals today, Dave.
No,
they're totally politicized. They haven't won a war since World War II, and responsible in part for the bad guidance or bad action not taken in Afghanistan, surrendering $75 to $80 billion worth of equipment. And then that's now in the hands of the Chinese, in case people don't know it. They've moved into Bagram Air Base. So it's a tragedy what's going on in this country.
So, Paul, let educate our listeners. Zelensky, which was really kind of a weird thing, talking in front of Congress the other day. It looked like something out of a movie. And here he was almost demanding a no-fly zone. Well, Paul, in my world, a no-fly zone, I believe, is not a de-escalation, but in fact an escalation, which could potentially escalate into World War III if we did that. Am I off?
No, you're exactly right, because basically when you create a no-fly zone, that means you're preventing or you're dictating that the enemy cannot fly in there. We did that over Iraq, as you may remember. The Iraqi Air Force or helicopters couldn't fly in that space. So if you declare a no-fly zone, all right, and of course Russia's not going to agree to that, then you got to enforce it. So now you have a no-fly zone. You have Russian MiGs flying in and out. Who's going to counter the MiGs in that airspace? Certainly not us. Certainly not the NATO nations. And so therefore, it's an action that can or should not be taken, because it can create that World War III environment. Then you may go to nukes, with Russia holding a lot of tactical nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles. A lot of things could happen in that no-fly zone. And so it's a bad action on anybody's part to even think it would be successful in enforcing that.
So, Paul, if I said to you, General Vallely, here's a plane for you to go anywhere in the world to try to solve this issue or try to de-escalate this situation, Paul, what needs to happen? Because what bothers me the most is for years, let alone months, let alone weeks, let alone days, Zelensky and Putin have not met in a room, and I think this whole situation could have been prevented if the two of them had gotten in a room years ago, months ago, weeks ago, and at a minimum days ago, to prevent more of this refugee situation, this death and destruction. Am I off on that? The fact that they have these conversations, but not amongst themselves and they're kind of spread out over a number of days and nothing gets done. And it just escalates every time. Well, Paul, am I off on that these guys should have been in a room long ago?
Oh, absolutely. And if it was under Trump, he would have flown into Warsaw or some neighboring country, invited Zelensky, invited Putin, sit down at the table and work it out. But you see, Joe Biden doesn't have those kind of skills, those kind of negotiation skills. He doesn't understand. He's an amateur at best and mentally incapacitated, as far as we know, just by his statements and briefing. There's something wrong with that guy. That's all I'll say. But no, and Trump would have met with him, and that's what I would have done. I'd have flown in. I'd have set up something, and you may not recall, but 5 years ago, from 3 weeks ago, I set up the first meeting, initiated the first meeting between Trump and Putin when I was in Moscow in March of 2017. And they finally led at the G10 conference in June of 2017. I think it was G10 or G7. I can't remember exactly. So it's doable. And Putin has said all along through my sources he wanted to meet with Trump again. But then the Russian hoax started. Everybody kept demonizing Putin. And after a while, as the word I've got through my sources, he really just got teed off at the Americans and the politicians from continually dehumanizing and not meeting with them. And so, yes, a face-to-face meeting is what you need, and you have to have the courage to do it. Biden doesn't have the skill or the courage.
So, Paul, play this out. Where are we going over the next 2 months on this?
I think Russia will prevail. as they encircle Kiev. They'll continue to march to the west. They'll shut that final corridor down between Poland and Ukraine. Supplies will be cut off, and Putin will end up putting in probably a puppet government.
Paul, there's been talk about these bioweapons labs, and at first people said in the government, oh, they don't exist. And then Victoria Nuland, who's a bad actor, was in front of Congress last week and said, oh, no, they exist, and I'm afraid that some of the bioweapons at these labs are going to fall in the hands of the Russians, and we're going to have problems. Well, then you had people out there saying, oh, no, they exist. Okay, they exist. You caught us. They exist, but they don't have anything nefarious in them. Well, Paul, I want to play a clip from a former Assistant Secretary of Defense under Obama. And he was speaking at a 2017 conference. And he was specifically was talking about being in Ukraine with the then junior senator from Illinois, Barack Obama, in 2005. And in particular, he was in a bioweapons lab in Ukraine with Obama. I want to play this clip and then get your take. Derek, hit it.
In Kiev, Ukraine, with a brand new junior senator from Illinois. It's at a public health laboratory, and he looks concerned, and it's because from this kitchen-like refrigerator behind me, the director of the health lab handed me this tray with vials of Bacillus anthracis. That's the bacteria that causes anthrax. And we mapped many facilities like this throughout the Soviet Union.
Your take, Paul? Well, it's been rumored they've had 8 to 12, maybe even more labs that the U.S. has participated in the creating of the pathogens in those labs, anthrax and so on. But I also understand, I'm not an expert in biolabs, but I understand those pathogens can be weaponized. And again, Putin knew about those labs as a threat to Russia, perhaps, another reason why he justified going in. But certainly we had Lindsey Nelson. I'm not Lindsey Nelson. Who am I thinking of? Senator Lindsey Graham.
Lindsey Graham. I wish Lindsey Nelson was in the Senate, the sportscaster. That would have been better.
Yeah, slip of the tongue. Sorry. But anyhow, no, we've known about him, and I mean, just so many different dynamics going on within the borders of Ukraine. And the Western media is only talking one side, supporting Zelensky, supporting the poor Ukrainian people, but no one has really brought up how powerful the Azovs are and exactly what's happening in eastern Ukraine with thousands being murdered by the Azovs and the Azov Battalion's brigade. So there you go. I mean, it's got to be solved, but someone's going to have to sit down and at a table and meet and draw some kind of a treaty or a conclusion to this.
Paul, educate our listeners on your website, because you put a tremendous amount of powerful information there on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's standupamericaus.org. You can sign up for our website there, which comes out every Saturday morning.